Hey guys, Mark Wildman Athletica here with Will Safford Bjj Fanatics, and he is going to educate me on the lead-in structure for the biggest competition for BJJ in the world.
So the AdCC Championship, most prestigious grappling event in the world, happens every 2 years, and it is the most elite grapplers getting together to find out who is the best in. They have 5 weight classes, 66 kilos, 77, 88, 99, and then over 99. You also have the absolute, so the open weight class where everybody can compete. What's interesting about AdCC is they have this super fight. So every weight class, right, you get, I don't know what the prize is, but if you win the absolute, I'm pretty sure you get like 40 grand to win the absolute. And if you win that, you get invited back the next AdCC. You bypass the entire tournament and you get put in the super fight against the previous absolute champion. So it's kind of this king of the hill thing. Whoever wins the absolute keeps fighting in this absolute super fight for 40 grand.
Okay.
So you don't have to go through the weight class again. You don't have to have all these matches against the best guys in the world. You cut right to the absolute super fight for 40 grand.
Which means you're a lot fresher as well, because
Exactly.
you're not fighting your way up through the ranks. So you get to come in fresh while everybody else has had just lots of fights.
Well, you don't fight that. You're not fighting anyone who has fought in the bracket. You're fighting the previous winner of that super fight from the 2 years before that.
So you're not fighting the guy who won
Absolute that year.
Not
Right.
Okay. So the guy who wins absolute, he comes back next year to fight the previous absolute guy.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So those are like the 2 best guys on the planet facing off every 2 years. It's epic. Andre Galvao has won it the last 6 years in a row, so he's done pretty well for himself. And the next AdCC, he is scheduled to fight Gordon Ryan, who won the absolute weight division in 2019. In order to get into AdCC in general, just to compete in the event, there's basically 2 ways. You can get invited. So to qualify for an invite, you have to prove that you are of that level, one of the best in the world. You have to be competing pretty regularly, or you have to have medaled or won, put on a really good performance in a previous AdCC in order to get an invite. The other way that you can get in is by qualifying through regional qualifiers. And those events are some of the most fierce, insane events out there because people are so hungry to get into AdCC. So in 2018, I got to go to a couple of them. I went to one over in Poland. It was the Eastern European qualifier. And it's just insane. You get those guys over there in Eastern Europe are just a different breed, man. Those guys.
I've been to Eastern Europe. Just in general, they're generally terrifying. I can't imagine one of those guys in competition. That would be horrifying.
Their jiu-jitsu is not quite up to the level of the Americans or the Brazilians, but just on pure heart and hustle, those guys are. It's going to be a tough day when you have to fight against some guy from Poland or Romania or anywhere over there in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, those ex-communist countries are. I mean, I worked with some stunt guys over there. They are different. They're different. Very, very different. Psychology is different. Their willingness to put up with very harsh conditions is extremely high. I mean, the food that they eat. I mean, it's crazy. Those guys are nuts.
Yeah.
Are there age categories as well, or is it everybody in the weight class?
Everybody in the weight class. There's no age limit. There's no masters division. There's no youth division. AdCC is just one division, one weight class. And what's interesting is that the history of AdCC is that the Sheikh from Abu Dhabi wanted to put together an event in order to see what the best grappling system was. So he invited people from Sambo, I think there was a sumo wrestler in there, from American wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, And it was almost like the idea behind the UFC, where the UFC was created to find what was the best martial art, right? Who were the best fighters? This guy did this specifically for grappling martial arts. There are judo fighters in there, Greco-Roman guys, but it's kind of, so you still get some of those guys in there, but it's kind of really now become pretty much jiu-jitsu fighters. You get some wrestlers. There was an amazing story in the last AdCC in the heavyweight, super heavyweight division. This guy Nick Rodriguez was he was like not even a really high level collegiate wrestler here in the United States, but he's big, he's a beast, and he's got a really good wrestling, fundamentals and foundation. Added like 1 or 2 years of jiu-jitsu training and took second place at AdCC.
So why are there not more Greco-Roman guys getting into it? Because their stand-up power and their speed is nuts. I just don't understand why they're not in there.
Well, I think...
Is it the length of the round?
It's a different rule set, and there's submissions. So you don't have submissions in Greco-Roman, right? So a lot of those guys are kind of turned off by some of that stuff. But okay. I think what Nick Rodriguez did in 2019 was showed to the world that AdCC is so wrestling heavy. There's so much emphasis put on wrestling that guys who have just rudimentary jiu-jitsu can go in there and win. And this guy showed it that being a really, really good wrestler and being in really good shape and just having a fundamental knowledge of jiu-jitsu, you can do well. So I think in this next one, we're going to see a lot more wrestlers come out and try to compete and do.
Yeah, why aren't they getting like those crazy Iranian Greco-Roman dudes are so fast? Like, why are they not hammering through it? Is it just because they don't know about it yet? It hasn't filtered to those types of dudes yet?
I think that has a lot to do with it. And Flo Grappling is responsible for putting on the AdCC. They're the ones who broadcast it. And just last year, 2019, I think it reached those audiences.
Yeah.
It got in front of those guys who were like, wait, what's going on here? And so that's why I think we're going to see, there's rumors that there's going to be some All-American wrestlers coming out.
I want to see that.
So that's what I'm saying. The trials are going to be really interesting this year because you're going to have anyone can pretty much go out and compete. Can do the trials. So I think you're going to have collegiate wrestlers in there. You can have blue belts.
So you can have. So think it's kind of like the CrossFit Open, where guys can come out and they compete, and then they get scored up, and then they move on, and then eventually they get to the games.
Exactly.
Oh, that's fascinating. I gotta not swear. Have you seen these Senegalese wrestler dudes?
Yes, those guys are badass.
What? How do we? Where do those guys? I mean, I just don't know enough about it. I've only seen like little clips of it here and there on the internet, but those guys look like a whole different breed again.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with their styles and like their training methods and stuff, but all I can say is that African fight sports right now is just popping off. Like,
they are crazy. Like, watching some of these guys fighting in sand pits, you're like, yes, that looks like something we should be doing.
Really tough dudes. You were saying earlier about how these guys in Eastern Europe, they're just tough human beings, right? And I think that you see that in fight sports. Anywhere where people have had to face a lot of adversity, you get tough fighters. If these guys are, in Africa fighting in sand pits, like you're saying, you're gonna develop a thick skin from that type of training, right? So
just can't imagine getting slammed over and over and over again in a sand pit.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I don't know what that does to you, because basically sand compresses for like a half a second. It's hard to push off of, but when you hit it, it turns into concrete.
There's a lot of those little pockets. I heard that there's really good Mongolian judo. Just, you would never think, but there's these little pockets around the world of people training combat sports, grappling sports, and that would be awesome to get one of those guys in AdCC.
Oh my God. I want to know if AdCC is going to do for wrestling-based sports what MMA did, where you originally had some karate guys, and then you got Muay Thai guys, you got some Sanda guys, and they all kind of And then it became MMA over the course of 15 years. I want to know if AdCC is going to do that. Because once you get some Greco-Roman guys or some All-American guys in there, is it going to change the entrances? And then are the entrances going to then influence the rest of the game? Because right now, you have a lot of guard positions and everything like that. Obviously, you're the guy who knows this. But then will the introduction of a Mongolian dude or a Senegalese dude change it entirely, just the way it happened in MMA, where certain things just weren't working anymore? So they were like, yeah, we do a lot of Muay Thai, and we do a lot of takedowns, and then we do a lot of BJJ.
It's an interesting point because jiu-jitsu itself has AdCC jiu-jitsu has kind of changed over the years because of the importance on wrestling and this new explosion of leg locks. So before, there were always leg locks in jiu-jitsu, but never at the extent now, the emphasis on the leg locks. And we're seeing now how important, you can't go into an AdCC match and not understand the leg lock game.
Yeah, you're going to get annihilated.
So if you bring in a really, really good wrestler, his weakness might be the leg lock game.
Yeah, but he also might have some crazy takedown in that fast standing spin thing that you always see, that terrifyingly fast move that they do. Can you still do, a suplex where you basically, you pick the guy up and chuck him over your shoulder and slam him on the ground and then do the spin roll?
Yep.
Can you do that in that? Is there rules against that type of movement which would preclude guys like BJJ guys?
I don't think so. I don't think you can do a lot in AdCC. I'm pretty sure you can do that. It's the rules are, that's why people love it, because the rules are like wide open. It's almost like the early days of MMA where you can do anything. So, but now you're saying, this importance, this emphasis on wrestling could really bring in some guy who is really, really good on his feet and is able to avoid, or maybe he can go into a takedown and just avoid any type of leg entanglement and do really well in the tournament just because he's got that level of skill.
Greco-Roman guys have been perfecting the sprawl to such a level of speed that I don't know what will happen. I just don't know what will happen. It's kind of the idea is like the way that Rousey, when she got into MMA, was really doing awesome for a long time because people weren't prepared to defend against that judo entrance throw.
Right.
As I understand it, or that's what at least my take on it was. But then it took, who was it? Was it Cyborg or somebody who figured out?
Holly Holm. Yeah, she was
figured out what the entrances were, and then just figured out how to stay away from it.
Yeah, exactly. She was the one who was able to beat. She stayed away from Ronda's takedown game and just played on the outside, and picked her apart with her Muay Thai, with her kicks. So that's the beauty of martial arts, is that
there's an answer to an answer to an answer. There is no ultimate art. It's the training methodology in my mind. It is how things are organized, and then it's developing that OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, problem-solving thing.
Exactly.
That's going through. And so he's super good at talking about strategy, like on a level that I truly appreciate, about how much wrestling becomes a chess game at these certain levels, which is, I was never anywhere close to something like that level of understanding. But now that it's really progressed to that point, I think it's fascinating to talk about.
Wait till you start getting into leg locks. Leg locks is a whole universe in itself that is just that is like the top of the chess game, and the consequences are so. If you get heel hooked and you don't tap quick enough, or you roll the wrong way, you're out for a long time. Yeah, you just tear your knee right apart.
Yeah, that stuff didn't exist. Well, it existed in some way, but that's why the Russian Sambo guys were so unique, is because they were the guys doing the leg attack wrestling.
Right.
And nobody else was prepared for that. Judo wasn't doing that. Jiu-jitsu guys weren't doing that. Greco-Roman dudes weren't doing that. So, and that was like literally a secret weapon of the Soviet Union, was they came up with a thing. They went out and they looked at all the other wrestling sports in the world, and they were like, what if we did something none of them are prepared for?
Right.
So you get that ambush moment. and then developing the system and kettlebells and body flow and all this
Yeah.
other crazy shit that's gone on for years.
But that's the evolution of martial arts, right? That's the beautiful thing. Right now, leg locks are the hot thing, so someone is going to figure out the answer to the leg lock, the anti-leg lock.
How long do you think it'll take? How long did it take for leg locks to come in? What was that like?
Man, well, they've been around. Dean Lister has been leg locking people in AdCC since like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
But just I think like 2017 is when that's when Gordon Ryan really hit the scene. 2017. Gary Tonen's another one who is big on leg locks, was using them at the AdCC level. So 2015, 2017, and then 2019, it was just heel hooks everywhere. You know, you needed to know, you had to know. You could get by without knowing leg locks at AdCC for a couple of years, but not anymore. You have to know the leg lock game because everyone's playing them, and they're so dangerous. So that's where we're at now.
All right. Well, this has been Mark and Will with an extraordinarily nerdy talk yet again about BJJ and combat sports. We're gonna do this forever.